When my husband found out he would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, he tore through the hospital room in a blind rage. This time, I didn't stop him. I simply stood in a safe corner, silently watching him destroy everything. In the end, he had to pay the hospital a hefty compensation, nearly draining all his savings. Back home, he trashed everything again. My son locked himself in his room, sending messages to Savannah. "Dad's really scary right now. Can you come and keep him company?" I pretended nothing had happened and quietly served 4 dishes and a soup on the table. Jeremiah slammed his hand down. "Your man's a cripple for life now, and you still have the nerve to sit there and eat. Did a dog eat your conscience?" I didn't even glance at him. I looked straight at my son. "Eat." He threw down his utensils, more furious than Jeremiah. "If Dad's not eating, I'm not eating either." "He's right. You're heartless. Aunt Savannah is way better than you. If she were here, she'd be comforting Dad, not just shoveling food into her mouth like you." I said nothing, only nodded and calmly picked a bit of each dish for myself. If I didn't eat now, I might not get another chance later. The moment he mentioned Savannah again, Jeremiah snapped. He swept the plates and bowls off the table in one violent motion and, in the chaos, lost his balance and toppled from his wheelchair. In my past life, I had always worried that he couldn't take the blow, constantly giving in only to be repaid with endless insults and abuse. Now I understood, if I meant nothing to him, then why should I care whether he lived or died? "Dad." My son rushed over, but with his small frame, he couldn't do a thing. "How can you still be eating? Don't you see?" Dad fell. "Why aren't you helping?" I continued chewing slowly and deliberately, my full attention on the meal before me. "Diana." Jeremiah roared, eyes bloodshot. "Get over here and help me up or you'll regret it." I calmly set my bowl down and pointed to the scattered food on the floor. "This is your meal. If you don't finish it, there won't be a next one. And if you don't want to eat, then go hungry." I turned and headed upstairs, leaving the father and son still hurling curses behind me. "Diana, once I can stand again, I'll tear you apart piece by piece, you filthy woman." My son tried to soothe him. "Dad, don't be mad. I already called on Savannah. She's coming soon, and I bet she'll bring something delicious." Jeremiah nodded with certainty. He and Savannah had always been close, and this time he had gotten injured saving her. Emotionally and morally, she had no reason not to step up and take care of him. "When Savannah gets here, I'm kicking that nasty woman out. She's just kicking me while I'm down. Yeah, I've always wanted to live with Aunt Savannah. She's 1,000 times better than her." I sneered. Savannah would come, but not yet. Lilith had scheduled an interview for me that afternoon. I needed to dress well and leave a good impression. Downstairs, the father and son kept rambling on, plotting how to kick me out and imagining their perfect little life with Savannah. When I came downstairs fully dressed, Jeremiah froze. I wore my old professional attire, stockings and high heels I hadn't touched in years. Back then, this look had driven him wild. I figured it still might. "Why are you dressed like that? I'm not even dead yet and you're already out to seduce other men?" I met his glare with a half smile. "Dead or alive, what difference does it make?" Jeremiah's face turned red with shame and fury. "Just wait until tonight. I'll make you pay for this. You should be more worried about how you'll get to the bathroom." I shut the door behind me, cutting off his useless rage. The interview went smoothly. Before marriage, I had already made a name for myself in the design world. I only gave it up to take care of the family. Lilith was generous. She directly assigned me to lead a branch's design projects right within my expertise. In the end, she insisted on treating me to a meal to thank me for returning her earring. By the time I got home, it was already 9 p.m. As I opened the door, a foul stench hit me, and I instinctively pinched my nose. Jeremiah was still in the same spot, filth dripping from his wheelchair and pooling across the floor. "How did you end up like this? Disgusting, isn't it?" Jeremiah clenched his teeth. "Help me up. My body's gone numb." I glanced around. "Where's your son?" He said it was too gross and locked himself in his room. I nodded. "Well, I find it gross too. I'm going back to my room." "Wait." Jeremiah looked reluctant. "I haven't eaten. Can you make me something?" I threw his own words right back at him. "You're a cripple now, and you still have the appetite to eat. If you're that hungry, isn't there food on the floor?" Jeremiah struggled to keep his composure. "That food, I already messed it up. That's your problem, nothing to do with me." Without another glance, I headed upstairs. In my previous life, I had slept with one eye open, worn myself thin, and landed in the hospital. But this time, I could finally enjoy a good night's rest. I slept soundly until 8 in the morning, my body light, my mind relaxed. When I came downstairs, the floor had been cleaned spotlessly. The 3 of them sat around the dining table, chatting and laughing like a cozy little family. Savannah peeled an egg for Jeremiah, then turned to glance at me. Sorry, I didn't know you were home. I didn't make breakfast for you. Jeremiah sank his teeth into the egg with hostility. Diana, did you really think I'd starve to death without you? You're wrong. I still have Savannah. She'll take good care of me. She's 10,000 times better than you. My son nodded vaguely, his mouth stuffed. I've never had such a delicious breakfast. Only I noticed the flicker of disgust and irritation in Savannah's eyes. I glanced around and sure enough, there was a phone propped up nearby, silently recording. Savannah's phone was angled just enough to catch every movement at the table, her smile perfectly practiced as she handed Jeremiah another peeled egg. Her tone was syrupy sweet, but I could see through it. I knew exactly why she was recording, building her own little archive of evidence to paint herself as the doting savior while I would be the cold, unfeeling wife who abandoned her husband. The problem for her was that I had no intention of playing the part they wanted. I walked past them without a word, poured myself a glass of water, and leaned casually against the counter. They continued chatting, their laughter a little too forced, their glances toward the camera a little too frequent. Jeremiah made a show of grimacing as he shifted in his wheelchair. See, Savannah? This is what I deal with every day. She just stands there, watching me struggle. Not a shred of compassion. Savannah let out a sympathetic sigh, touching his shoulder lightly. You don't deserve this, Jeremiah. No man does. But you have me now. And I'll take care of you until you're back on your feet. My son's eyes lit up at her words. Aunt Savannah, can I live with you too? You cook way better than her, and you don't yell all the time. I watched her hesitate for a split second before patting his hand. Of course, sweetheart. My home is always open to you. Her eyes flicked toward me then, a subtle challenge. In my past life, this might have been the moment I broke, where I'd start defending myself, raising my voice, falling right into their trap. Not this time. I took a slow sip of water and simply walked away. The less I said now, the more their own words would betray them later. Upstairs, I pulled out my laptop and went over the design briefs Lilith had sent me the night before. The projects were ambitious, high-profile, and exactly the kind of work that could rebuild the career I'd abandoned years ago. My phone buzzed, a message from Lilith. Big meeting tomorrow morning. The client wants to see concept sketches. Think you can have something ready? I typed back without hesitation. I'll have them tonight. That was the difference now. I had something worth focusing on, something that didn't revolve around cleaning up after Jeremiah's tantrums or placating a son who had learned to measure my worth against someone else's approval. By late afternoon, the house had gone quiet. I could hear faint voices downstairs, but they were muffled. Savannah must have taken Jeremiah and my son out for lunch. That suited me just fine. I spread my papers out across the dining table, my pencil moving quickly as ideas took shape. This was the part of me I had missed the most, the precision, the problem-solving, the thrill of creating something from nothing. I was so deep in work that I didn't even notice the front door open until their laughter came spilling back inside. Jeremiah wheeled himself in first, Savannah pushing him like some victorious knight returning from battle. My son carried a paper bag that smelled strongly of fried food. We brought lunch, Savannah announced, setting it on the counter. But, well, I didn't know if you'd want any. The implication was clear. I didn't look up from my sketches. I already ate, I lied. The truth was I hadn't, but I wasn't about to accept her charity. Jeremiah smirked. Suit yourself. More for us. They ate in the living room, the sound of wrappers crinkling and drink slurping loud enough to carry upstairs. I ignored it. I had no interest in sharing their table or their staged little moments for the camera. Instead, I kept working until my stomach made it impossible to concentrate. I went to the kitchen quietly, but Savannah's voice followed me. Oh, Diana, by the way, I'll be staying here for a few days. Jeremiah needs proper care, and clearly, you're too busy to provide it. I finally looked up at her. Stay as long as you like, I said evenly. Just make sure you clean up after yourself. I'm not your maid. Her lips pressed into a tight smile, the kind you give when you think you've won a round but can't quite prove it. Of course, she replied, her tone dripping with false sweetness. The next few days were an exercise in calculated patience. Savannah inserted herself into every aspect of the house, rearranging furniture for accessibility, setting up Jeremiah's medications in the kitchen, even dictating what my son should wear to school. Jeremiah basked in the attention, praising her cooking, her kindness, her dedication, all while casting me as the villain in his every sentence. My son followed suit, laughing louder at her jokes than he ever had at mine, parroting her criticisms with the eager cruelty of a child who thought he was on the winning team. But I wasn't idle. Each evening, I stayed late at the branch office Lilith had assigned me to, working on designs, networking with old contacts, and quietly re-establishing myself in the industry. I could see the surprise on Lilith's face each time I handed her a finished project ahead of schedule. She started inviting me to client meetings, introducing me as one of the best designers I've ever worked with. It wasn't flattery, It was a fact. And the more my professional world expanded, the smaller the chaos at home felt. One evening, I came home to find Savannah in the kitchen, her phone propped up again, recording as she spoon-fed Jeremiah soup. "He's had a hard day," she said, her tone as soft as a lullaby. "The least I can do is make sure he eats properly." I put my bag down and glanced at the pot on the stove. "Smells nice," I said casually. "Make enough for everyone?" She froze, just for a moment, before saying, "There's some bread left. Help yourself." I took a slice without comment, tearing it slowly as I leaned against the counter. The camera caught every movement, but my face was unreadable. Later that night, when Savannah finally went to bed, I checked the stove. The soup was almost untouched. Jeremiah had eaten a few spoonfuls for the performance, then pushed it away. He didn't want her food, he wanted her attention. And she wanted the footage. The turning point came the following weekend. Lilith invited me to a formal networking dinner, one that could secure contracts worth more than anything the branch had handled in years. I wore a sleek black dress, minimal jewelry, and the confidence I had earned back piece by piece. As I left the bedroom, Jeremiah's eyes widened. "Another man tonight?" He spat. I didn't even pause. "Another future," I corrected. Savannah, sitting beside him, muttered something under her breath, but I was already out the door. The dinner was a success. I returned home well past midnight, my phone buzzing with congratulatory messages from colleagues and even a few potential clients. The house was dark except for a faint light in the living room. Savannah was asleep on the couch, her phone in her hand, screen still recording. Jeremiah sat in his wheelchair, staring at the door as if he had been waiting all night. "You think you're so clever," he said. "But when Savannah moves in here for good, you'll have nowhere to go." I smiled faintly. "That's what you think." Then I went upstairs, my mind already running through the next steps. I had been patient long enough. The documents I needed were almost ready, the contacts willing to back me up were lined up, and the timing was perfect. Savannah and Jeremiah thought they were building a case against me. In reality, they were documenting every reason I needed to walk away, on my terms, with everything I wanted intact. The quiet war had begun. And this time, I wasn't going to lose. The next morning I woke before the alarm and lay still, listening to the muted house. For a long minute there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the hallway clock. Then came the sound I had begun to recognize over the last few days, the whisper of a camera tripod being opened, the soft scrape of a phone case against wood, the forced brightness of Savannah's voice rehearsing lines under her breath. I rose quietly, dressed, and gathered the folder I had assembled the night before. Inside were copies of hospital invoices and incident reports, photographs of the broken dishes and overturned chair, a printed log of dates and times when Jeremiah had refused to take medication or eat unless someone performed for him, and a short list of home care agencies that accepted his insurance. I had underlined 2 of them in red. I did not intend to keep playing nurse for free, and I did not intend to let Savannah turn the house into her stage. When I came downstairs, Savannah was perched at the edge of a dining chair, angling her phone toward the kitchen like a hunter watching a burrow. Jeremiah sat in his wheelchair near the table, hair combed neatly, wearing a new pajama top with a small embroidered crest at the pocket. My son hovered at the counter, pouring cereal and glancing back at the lens as if he were checking whether he existed. Savannah looked up with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Morning, Diana." I made coffee. I poured my own from the machine before she could offer. Jeremiah cleared his throat. "Since you are so busy, Savannah and I decided she should manage the house for a while. She will coordinate meals, cleaning, my therapy, school drop-offs." He paused for effect. "We agreed it is best for our family." I sipped and waited. He misread my silence as surrender. He nodded to the phone. "For transparency. I want everything documented so there are no misunderstandings." I laid the folder on the table, slid out a single page, and set it in front of him. It was the coverage summary from his insurer listing approved benefits for in-home care after discharge. "You are eligible for a home health aide 3 days a week and physical therapy at home twice a week for 8 weeks, I said. "I have scheduled assessments with 2 agencies this afternoon. A professional will come evaluate what you need. Until then, no one is moving furniture and no one is changing medication schedules without a clinician's approval." Savannah's fingers tightened around her phone. Her smile flickered. Jeremiah scoffed. "We do not need strangers trampling through. Savannah knows me. She can do everything." "A professional caregiver is not a stranger," I said. "She is trained, insured, and accountable. Also, there is one more thing." I pulled out a written notice I had drafted and signed before leaving the office the night before. It stated, plainly, that recording inside the home without the consent of all parties would no longer be permitted, and that any recording featuring our minor child was expressly forbidden. I placed it next to his plate. Phones can be used for calls and messages. If a camera is out, it faces the wall or it goes away. Savannah let out a soft laugh. What are you going to do, sue me for filming breakfast? I met her eyes. If you publish or share any footage of me or of my child without permission, I will file a complaint and seek an order to stop you. If you continue, I will pursue damages. And if you record Jeremiah's medical routines and mishandle them on camera, I will hand everything to the insurer's fraud unit. The laugh died. Jeremiah bristled. This is my house. Actually, it is our house, I said. And it is still my son's home. If you want cameras, put them in your own. My son flinched, glancing from me to Savannah. She recovered first, switching to a tone so soft it nearly disappeared. I was only trying to keep a record in case she neglects you, she told Jeremiah, angling the line toward the lens. He reached to squeeze her hand. You are the only one who cares. I did not respond. I simply picked up the notice, walked to the phone prop near the salt shaker, and turned it carefully so the lens faced the wall. I left it there and carried my coffee to the sink. By noon, the house wore the tense quiet of a waiting room. Savannah had not left, but she had recoiled a step from the performance, testing which lines she could still deliver without losing ground. She swapped the camera for low whispers and long sighs. She followed Jeremiah from room to room, straightening blankets and smoothing his sleeve, muttering small assurances that he repeated later with interest. My son trailed them like a shadow, hungry for tasks and praise. When he asked if he could skip school to help, Savannah stroked his hair and said it was all right this once, because family comes first and because the world was unfair to good men who had sacrificed so much. I did not argue in front of him. I called the school from the car and told them he would be late and that I would send a note. Then I drove to the office for a meeting I could not afford to miss and returned just in time to meet the first nurse. Her name was Pilar. She arrived exactly on the dot with a clipboard, a calm gaze, and a polite firmness that I liked instantly. She introduced herself to Jeremiah, nodded to Savannah without breaking tone, and asked to see discharge instructions, medication lists, and the layout of the house. Jeremiah tried to steer the conversation toward his pain and how cruel I had been the previous night by refusing to cook, then toward Savannah's devotion and how she had rescued him from an impossible situation. Pilar listened without comment, then asked to test his transfer to the couch using the board the hospital had sent home. She measured doorway widths, asked him to demonstrate how he repositioned himself, and watched him attempt to pick up a dropped phone with the grabber. After 20 minutes she sat at the table and spoke to both of us. Safety first. No rugs in the path, no bowls or wires on the floor, no chairs wedged in doorways. The bathroom needs a raised seat and a secured handrail, not a towel bar. He should not attempt to lift the wheelchair alone. Above all, she said, the primary caregiver must rest. Exhausted caregivers cause injuries. She looked at me. You are working. Good. That helps. Then she looked at Savannah. And you are a family friend. You can assist. But we will supply trained aides on scheduled days. Please sign here to acknowledge plans and risks. Savannah hesitated only a second before picking up the pen. When she wrote her name, her mouth tightened as if she were signing away property. Jeremiah scowled and scrawled his signature with a heavy hand. Pilar did not flinch. She scheduled the first aid for 2 days later, printed a list of exercises for Jeremiah to attempt twice daily, and told him she would return with a physical therapist tomorrow. On her way out, she stopped at the sink, rinsed her hands, and turned briefly to look at the counter where Savannah's phone had been left face down. She tapped the paper notice I had left beside it. Good boundary, she said quietly, and left. That evening, Lilith called between emails to go over the next day's client drafts. I put her on speaker and walked her through 3 variations on the concept we had discussed. My son and Savannah were in the living room playing a word game. I could hear their laughter spike when I used a design term they did not recognize. Jeremiah chimed in now and then with a joke about how artists talked like they were solving a crime. When I ended the call, I found him staring at me with a mixture of contempt and something smaller, something like worry he would not name. He tried to say something cutting about dinners and loyalty, but the words slid off the surface of his own need. He had not eaten much and it showed in the way his hands rested on the armrests, a shade weaker than they had been that morning. I reheated some rice and eggs for myself and ate at the counter. No one asked for a portion. Savannah posted a photo of a table setting, cropped so tightly it could have been anywhere, and added a caption about showing up for the people who show up for you. My son laughed aloud when he saw it and asked if he could write a comment with hearts. I told him he could finish his math assignment first. He rolled his eyes and drifted to his room with the phone still in his hand. The physical therapist came the next afternoon, a man named Arthur with steady hands and the patient voice of someone used to being blamed for pain he did not cause. He was polite to Savannah and precise with Jeremiah. For the first 10 minutes Jeremiah cooperated. For the next 10 he argued. For the last 10 he refused. Arthur did not shame or plead. He marked the baseline score, wrote down the goal for the week, and told Jeremiah exactly what would happen to his muscles if he insisted on rage instead of work. When Arthur left, Jeremiah exploded. He accused me of conspiring with strangers to humiliate him in his own home. He accused the therapist of forcing him to suffer for a quota. He accused Savannah of not defending him loudly enough. She cried, which satisfied him for a moment, then gently scolded him for raising his voice because the microphone on her phone might not handle shouting well. He forgot his anger and asked her to check if the audio had clipped. She did, and said it was fine. I looked at the clock and realized I had 15 minutes to call a client and confirm a design pivot that would lock in a contract. I went upstairs, shut the door, and made the call. That night, I sat at the dining table with my folder, adding notes. I wrote down the therapy refusal and the nurse's recommendations. I printed my pay stubs from the last 2 weeks and stapled them to the front of a new section labeled Finances. I listed groceries purchased and items consumed by me versus the others. I made a list titled Incidents and left room under each for date, time, and witnesses. At the bottom of that page I added another header, Conversation with a Lawyer. I knew exactly whom to call. One of Lilith's clients, a woman who ran a boutique firm downtown, had introduced herself to me at the networking dinner. She had slipped her card into my hand and said, "If you ever need to draw clean lines, call me." I set the card on top of the folder and stared at it until the edges blurred. I did not sleep well. Around 2 in the morning, a thump sounded from the hallway followed by a muffled curse. I opened my door to find my son standing in the dark, rubbing his foot. He had tripped on the folded laundry basket Savannah had left outside my room. He looked small in the half-light, suddenly younger than his practiced tone at the table implied. "Are you hurt?" I asked. He shrugged, trying to recover the posture he wore for Savannah's camera. "I am fine. I was just going to the kitchen. Do you want water?" He hesitated. "Can I have hot chocolate?" It was summer, but I nodded. In the kitchen I warmed milk on the stove. He leaned against the fridge and watched the pot with the intense seriousness of a surgeon. When I set the mug in front of him, he wrapped both hands around it. "Do you hate Dad?" he asked without looking up. I answered honestly. "I do not hate him." He swallowed and nodded, then said, "Aunt Savannah said you want to send him away." I said, "Aunt Savannah is mistaken. I want him to get the help he needs." He took a sip and asked, "If he gets better, will we be like before?" I looked at the streaks of dried broth near the baseboard. "Before what?" "Before the accident? Before we pretended his anger was love?" He looked up then, noticing my silence and the lines under my eyes. He set the mug down carefully. "Good night," he said, and left. 2 days later, the first aide arrived. Her name was Tanya, and she wore her hair tied back with a blue ribbon and her badge clipped to a lanyard. She introduced herself with a smile that somehow managed to be kind without being permissive. She washed her hands, checked Jeremiah's vitals, and asked him to show her how he transferred. He complained that the board was uncomfortable and the wheelchair seat too firm. She adjusted the cushion, rolled a towel for support, and taught him a method that kept his shoulders safer. Savannah tried to narrate for the phone in a stage whisper. Tanya turned and said gently, "Let us give him a little quiet." Savannah stepped back, stung. After an hour, Tanya wrote down what had been done and what would be attempted the next day. She asked me to sign. Then she handed me a list of household adjustments that could prevent falls and reduce stress on everyone. It was practical, doable, and unsentimental. It made Savannah furious. After Tanya left, Savannah paced the kitchen. She snapped the towel at the counter, rearranged the fruit bowl, and then spun on me. "You are trying to erase me," she said. "You want strangers to replace me so you can look like a saint while I get pushed out." I put my pen down. "No," I said. "I want a trained caregiver to do trained work." She leaned in. "He got hurt because of me," she whispered, "and I will make it right." "You think a name tag makes someone family?" I said, "Family is not a camera. Family is not an alibi." She laughed, a thin sound that trembled on the way out. "Watch me," she said. Then she lifted her phone. I expected another carefully cropped photo of a bowl of soup. Instead she called someone. Her voice dropped into a tone of practiced intimacy. I could not hear the words, but I could hear the cadence. When she ended the call, she set the phone down as if it were a card laid in the center of a table. A minute later there was a knock. 2 women entered with a bag of groceries and a bouquet of flowers. They looked around with the bright, slightly invasive curiosity of people who attend other people's lives for a living. "We are here to film a kindness segment," one of them said. Savannah told us about Jeremiah's accident and how his wife has been absent. I felt something go very still inside me. Savannah clapped her hands lightly. "Surprise. These wonderful ladies run a channel that helps highlight caregivers and gives them the support they deserve. They will deliver meals this week and help raise funds for a wheelchair ramp." Jeremiah's face flushed with pleasure. My son's eyes widened with the thrill of being at the center of a story. I looked at the bouquet and saw the card already addressed to Savannah, not to him. "No cameras," I said. The women exchanged glances. Savannah's voice sharpened. "You cannot stop us from helping." I pointed to the written notice on the counter. You can help. You cannot film in my home without consent. They turned to Jeremiah for permission. He straightened in the chair. I am the head of this household, he announced. I give consent. I walked to the doorway and stood there. Our son is a minor, I said. You film him, you will hear from someone who will make you wish you had read a law book first. The women faltered. Savannah tried to recover with a laugh. We can blur his face. We can shoot outside. I repeated, no filming inside. If you want to leave the groceries at the door, thank you. If you want to build a ramp, we will discuss permits and contractors. But you will not stage my kitchen and you will not turn my family into your content. They left after 5 awkward minutes, clutching their bouquet like a trophy they had not won. Savannah slammed the pantry door and disappeared into the hallway. Jeremiah leveled his gaze at me. You are jealous that people love her. I looked down at the list Tanya had left. I said, I'm not jealous. I am busy. His mouth twisted. Busy being cold. I did not answer. I gathered the groceries the women had brought, set aside what we could use, and bagged the rest to deliver to a shelter on my way to the office. My son watched me from the doorway, trying to decide which way to turn. When I picked up my keys, he took a small step toward me. Are you coming back tonight? He asked. Yes, I said. He nodded as if he did not believe me and vanished into the living room. On the drive downtown, I called the lawyer from the card. Her name was Erica. She listened as I described the last week in plain sentences. She asked precise questions and did not flinch at the answers. When I finished, she said, we will not file anything today. We will prepare. I will need copies of those invoices and the incident log. We will separate finances. We will secure your pay. We will set boundaries for custody and communication. If he violates, we act. If she publishes, we act. You will not engage in theatrics. You will collect facts. Can you do that? Yes, I said. Good, she replied. Then go to work and be excellent. It will speed everything. I was excellent. I worked until the evening air slipped purple between the buildings and my inbox went quiet. When I returned home, the lights were low and the living room smelled faintly of antiseptic. Jeremiah was asleep, mouth open slightly, hands relaxed on a folded blanket. Savannah was not there. My son sat on the floor with a math worksheet and a pencil. He looked up when he heard my key. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, Aunt Savannah had to go out. I nodded and set my bag down. Do you want help with that? I asked. He hesitated, then pushed the paper toward me with a gesture that did not quite concede. We worked in the quiet, erasing and trying again, drawing boxes where carrying would make the numbers less messy. When we finished, he set the pencil carefully beside the paper and said, Why do people on the internet think Aunt Savannah is a hero? I answered truthfully. Because she tells them a story they can understand without doing any work. He turned that over. After a while he said, Is work always the answer? No, I said, but it is the only part we can control. At midnight I woke to the sound of the front door opening. Savannah's whisper carried up the stairs. She was laughing softly, repeating a line as if she needed to hear it echoed back. I went to the landing and looked down. She stood in the hallway with a man I did not know. He wore a delivery uniform with a logo I recognized from the ramp company Tanya had recommended. Savannah brushed his sleeve as she told him where to measure. He looked around the living room, the arch of the doorway, the slope of the small front step. He nodded and began making notes. He did not pull out a phone. He pulled out a measuring tape. It sang out in a bright metal line and snapped back with a positive click. The sound was so refreshingly real that it startled me. He wrote down numbers and never once asked for a shot. When he left, Savannah lifted her phone and filmed the empty hallway, angling the lens so that if you did not know better you might imagine an entire crew had been there. She whispered thank you to her viewers. Then she went to the kitchen and ate in the glow of the screen. The next morning, Tanya returned to find the bathroom rearranged again. She looked at the towels draped over the bar like a makeshift sling and raised an eyebrow at me. I shook my head. She addressed Jeremiah with calm authority. We will do transfers the way we were taught. We will use tools, not towels. He tried to argue, then glanced at Savannah, who had that strained brightness again, and gave in. My son came to watch. He did not reach for Savannah's hand this time. He folded his arms and kept his eyes on Tanya's face as she explained each step. When Jeremiah settled on the couch without jerking his shoulder, my son let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Tanya turned to him. Do you want to learn how to place the board safely? He looked at me. I nodded. She showed him, and he did it, slowly, carefully, exactly as she had demonstrated. When he was done, Tanya smiled at him in a way that had nothing to do with the lens. Good, she said. You are part of the team now. He looked at his hands as if he had never seen them. After Tanya left, the house felt different. The camera on the counter lay untouched. Savannah scrolled and scrolled, her thumbnail beating a nervous rhythm against the edge of the phone. Jeremiah sat very still, as if surprised by the absence of an audience. My son hovered in the doorway with a question on his face that he did not ask. I went to the sink and washed my cup. The water ran clear and ordinary. I dried the cup, set it in the cabinet, and turned back to the folder waiting on the table. The list labeled Conversation with a Lawyer now included dates and signatures. The section called Finances had 4 new lines where I had redirected my pay. The page called Incidents had neat entries filled with ink, not anger. I did not announce a victory or deliver a speech. I dressed for work, collected my bag, and told my son I would be back by 7. He nodded without sarcasm. Savannah did not look up. Jeremiah muttered something about loyalty that sounded tired even to him. I left the house, locked the door, and stepped into air that felt like the inside of a new room. The quiet war continued, but the terrain was changing. They could still stage their scenes. They could still whisper their versions into any device that would listen. I would not stop them with louder words. I would stop them with contracts, with logs, with work done well and boundaries that did not bend. And when the time came to draw the clean line, I would draw it, not with pity or fire, but with a steady hand. The morning began with a phone call I had been expecting but still found oddly satisfying. Erica's voice was crisp, almost cheerful, as she told me the preliminary documents were ready. The separation of finances, the caregiver boundaries, the clauses about recording and content use, each one drafted in airtight language. We won't file them yet, she said, but we'll have them ready to slide across the table when the timing is perfect. Let them keep talking, Diana. Every word they speak without realizing you're documenting it is a gift. It was a gift they gave freely. When I returned home that evening, Savannah was on the couch beside Jeremiah, both of them staring at her phone. She was scrolling through a comment thread, reading the praise out loud with relish. Look, someone says I'm an inspiration. Oh, and here, you are the kind of person the world needs more of. She let out a modest laugh and glanced toward me as if to check whether I'd heard. Jeremiah chuckled along, adding, they've got that right. You're the only one keeping this house running. My son sat cross-legged on the floor, trying to angle his head so he could see the screen. What did they say about me? He asked eagerly. Savannah smirked. They think you're adorable. A natural caretaker, just like your dad. You should be proud. His smile widened. That was how she kept them hooked, offering just enough flattery to make them hungry for more. I didn't respond. I went to the kitchen, opened my folder, and added a note. 3:45 p.m. Savannah reading comments aloud, framing herself as sole caretaker, involving minor in online attention. Facts, not feelings. Erica's voice echoed in my mind, let the record speak for you later. The next day, I left early for a client presentation. It went better than expected. One of my designs was selected unanimously, and the project lead invited me to submit additional proposals for a second campaign. This was the kind of momentum I'd been working toward, and I felt it in my posture as I walked into the house that evening. But the moment I stepped inside, the smell hit me. Not food, bleach. Strong, acrid, recent. Savannah was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters with an exaggerated flourish. Jeremiah had a little accident earlier, she said, but don't worry, I cleaned everything. You don't need to lift a finger. I glanced at the trash bin, several paper towels stained with what looked like coffee, but the dark splatter on the floor near the dining chair told a different story. Where's Jeremiah now? I asked. She smiled brightly. Resting in the living room. He's had a hard day. When I entered the living room, Jeremiah was watching TV, a blanket draped over his lap. Savannah says you fell, I said. He shrugged. I'm fine. She handled it. I walked closer and noticed a faint red mark on his arm, minor but fresh. Did you call Tanya? I asked. His jaw tightened. No need. Savannah was here. My son, sitting nearby, chimed in. She's better than the nurse anyway. She knows what Dad needs. I didn't argue. Instead, I walked back to the kitchen and quietly typed a detailed account into my phone. Possible fall at approximately 2 p.m. No professional notified. Minor injury to left arm. Bleach used to clean floor. I would print it later for the folder. 2 days passed without Tanya, as Jeremiah claimed he didn't feel up to therapy. Savannah hovered more than ever, filming less but whispering more. She began steering conversations toward the idea of her moving in permanently, for the sake of stability. She said it casually in front of my son, who repeated it later as if it were already decided. If Aunt Savannah lives here all the time, maybe we can have pancakes every morning, he said hopefully. The turning point came on Saturday. I had spent the morning at the office and returned just before noon to find a strange car parked in the driveway. Inside, a man I didn't know was standing in the kitchen with a clipboard. He looked startled when he saw me. I'm here to take measurements for the ramp installation, he said. I frowned. Who scheduled you? Savannah, he replied. She breezed in from the hallway just then, all smiles. Surprise. The donations from my channel covered the cost. Isn't this wonderful? Jeremiah wheeled himself in, grinning. She's making things happen, Diana. Something you've never done for me. I kept my voice calm. Installing a ramp requires permits. It also affects property value. No work is being done here without my approval. Savannah's smile faltered. It's already paid for. Do you really want to look ungrateful in front of the donors? There it was, her leverage. But she'd made a mistake. Donations tied to personal injury cases, especially when filmed without consent, were a legal minefield. I took out my phone and snapped a clear photo of the clipboard, capturing the company name and the work order number. Thank you for coming, I told the man, but this installation will have to be rescheduled until all legal requirements are met. He looked uneasy but nodded, gathered his things, and left. Savannah's expression darkened. You're sabotaging everything? No, I said evenly. I'm protecting this house from becoming a liability, and protecting you from charges you don't understand. She didn't respond, but the tightness in her jaw told me she understood perfectly well. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I scanned the work order photo into my laptop and added it to a new folder labeled Potential Legal Breaches. Erica would want it. I also uploaded the log entries from the past week, along with photos of the bleach stain and Jeremiah's arm. Piece by piece, the wall I was building grew higher. The following week brought a shift I hadn't anticipated. My son began seeking me out, not for long conversations, but in small, almost shy ways. He lingered in the doorway when I cooked, asked if I could quiz him on spelling words, even followed me to the store one evening without being asked. Savannah noticed, and the change unsettled her. She tried to pull him back into her orbit with promises of outings and treats, but the more she pushed, the more he drifted toward me. One afternoon, while Jeremiah napped, my son asked quietly, "Are you going to leave?" I looked at him. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged, but his eyes stayed on mine. "Aunt Savannah says you don't like it here and that you'll go away soon. But I don't want you to." I felt something tighten in my chest. "I'm not going anywhere without making sure you're safe," I told him. He nodded, then asked, "Safe from what?" I didn't answer directly. "Safe from people who think they can decide your life for you." That night, I emailed Erica again. This time, the subject line was simple: timeline for action. I told her I was ready to move forward, not just with the caregiver boundaries, but with the separation process. Jeremiah and Savannah had grown too comfortable, too certain I was powerless. It was time to remind them that silence was not the same as surrender. 2 mornings later, Erica arrived at my office with a stack of papers and a calm, deliberate smile. "We'll start with a financial separation," she said. "Once that's in place, everything else follows more easily. And Diana, once this is filed, things will change fast. Be ready." I was ready. And for the first time in years, I didn't just mean it. The day Erica filed the financial separation, the air in the house seemed to shift in ways the others couldn't quite name. I said nothing about it at breakfast, just poured my coffee and left for the office. But I noticed Savannah's glances, quick, sharp, suspicious, and Jeremiah's questions growing more pointed. "Where were you yesterday afternoon?" he asked. "At work," I replied without looking up. He studied me for a moment as though he could smell the change. That evening, when I came home, Savannah was waiting in the living room, phone in hand, camera already rolling. "I want to talk about how you're abandoning your husband," she began, voice pitched with righteous outrage. Jeremiah nodded from his wheelchair, clearly prepared to deliver his own performance. My son sat nearby, eyes darting between us. I set my bag down and said evenly, "Savannah, put the phone away." She smirked. "Why? Afraid of the truth getting out?" I walked to the coffee table, took the phone, and set its screen down. "You're about to hear the truth, but you won't be recording it." From my folder, I pulled a neatly bound packet of papers and placed it in front of Jeremiah. "This is a legal separation of finances, effective today. My income, accounts, and assets are no longer tied to yours. The insurance benefits and professional caregivers will continue, but personal expenses will come from your funds alone. That includes anything Savannah purchases or orders in your name." Jeremiah's mouth opened, then closed. Savannah scoffed. "You can't just." "I can, I cut in, and I have. There's also a restraining clause regarding recordings and the use of our son's image. Violate it, and you'll face legal consequences." I looked at Savannah directly. "That applies to you, too." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by my son's quiet, "What does that mean?" I softened my tone for him. "It means the people who take care of you have to follow rules that keep you safe and private." He nodded slowly, as if piecing it together. Jeremiah tried to recover, leaning back in his chair with forced arrogance. "So what, you think you've won? You'll come crawling back when no one else wants you." I smiled faintly. That's where you're wrong. I'm not coming back. This isn't a fight for me, it's freedom. Savannah laughed, but there was no conviction in it. You think anyone's going to believe you over us? She asked. They don't have to believe me, I said. They just have to see the facts. I tapped the folder. And I have every one of them documented. The days that followed were strange. Savannah stopped filming inside the house entirely. The cheery online updates about family recovery vanished, replaced by vague posts about toxic people and misunderstood loyalty. Jeremiah's temper flared more often, but without financial control or the public platform Savannah had built around him, his outbursts lost their audience. My son began spending more evenings in my room, doing homework at my desk while I worked on designs. He didn't say much at first, but his quiet presence spoke volumes. One night, as I was reviewing sketches, he said softly, I like it better when it's just us. I paused, looked at him, and said, me too. 2 weeks after filing, Erica called. Everything is moving faster than expected. The caregiver agency has agreed to take over fully, and the property records are updated. You're free to relocate anytime. I exhaled, the weight I'd carried for years finally shifting off my shoulders. Then it's time, I said. That weekend, while Savannah was out and Jeremiah napped, I packed my essentials into 2 suitcases. My son stood in the doorway, holding his backpack. Are we really leaving? He asked. Yes, I said. We're going somewhere we can live without all this noise. He hesitated. What about Dad? I met his gaze. He'll have the care he needs. And we'll have the peace we need. We left without ceremony, slipping out quietly and closing the door behind us. I didn't look back. Our new place was smaller but filled with light. No cameras in corners, no staged conversations, no constant performance for an unseen audience. Just the sound of pages turning when my son read at the table, and the rhythmic scratch of my pencil on design paper. Jeremiah tried calling a few times. Savannah sent one long message full of accusations and self-pity. I forwarded both to Erica and then blocked them. The quiet after that was absolute, and it was beautiful. One evening, my son looked up from his homework and asked, So, is this it? The new life? I smiled. Yes. And this time, we decide what it looks like. For the first time in years, I felt the ground under my feet, solid, steady, and entirely mine. The war was over, and I had won without ever lowering myself to their game. All I had needed was patience, proof, and the certainty that I deserved better. And now, finally, I had it.